father's new wife tried forcing me out of my own home the moment he died. She claimed she deserved the house more since she was his widow, so I let her believe she'd win until I revealed everything at the family dinner. My father had just died, and before I could even take a breath, his brand new wife, married for barely 6 months, mind you, started trying to steal everything he left behind. Can you even imagine that level of disrespect? But she had no idea who she was messing with. Losing my dad, it was like the world just stopped. One moment, he was right there, telling one of his ridiculously long stories, the kind I used to playfully roll my eyes at. The next, he was gone. And suddenly, I was trapped in a room full of hushed condolences, nodding politely, when all I wanted was to just disappear and scream. I deserved to grieve in peace, right? But oh no, his new wife, my stepmother of just 6 months, had other plans. She made sure that wasn't an option. I didn't exactly dislike her when Dad first introduced us. She was polite, had this sickly sweet voice, but something always felt off. She married him so fast, you know? Less than half a year before he passed. And even though I tried to be happy for him, to tell myself he'd found companionship, I just couldn't shake this gut feeling that she was way more interested in his bank account than his heart. But I stayed quiet. If he was happy, I wasn't going to ruin it. Looking back now, God, I regret that silence. The first real red flag? That came at the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting any big surprises. My dad had always been so clear about his wishes. The house, our home, the one I grew up in, that was mine. I was his only child after all. He'd set aside a really generous amount of money for her, enough to make sure she was completely taken care of. But the house? Nope. That was unequivocally mine. She didn't react much at first, just nodded like she already knew. But later, after everyone had cleared out, that's when she made her move. She found me at the dining table. The same one where Dad and I used to eat breakfast every morning. She sat across from me, put on this sickeningly sweet tone, and started. "I know you're grieving," she began. "But wouldn't it make more sense for you to move out and let me stay?" Her justification? I was your father's wife. His partner. I was there in his final moments. Shouldn't she have the right to stay? I looked her dead in the eye, trying to stay calm. I told her this wasn't just his home. It was mine. He'd left it to me for a reason. She tried that fake sympathetic smile again, then piled on the guilt. Oh, she was a grieving widow with nowhere to go, all alone now, devoted herself to my father, and this was the least I could do. She even threw in how young I was, and had my whole life ahead of me. Why would I want to be tied down by a house full of memories? I didn't take the bait. Not a chance. I reminded her very calmly that my father had already set her up financially. She wasn't struggling. And if she truly needed a place, she could easily find a new one. That's when the act completely dropped. Her smile vanished. She scoffed, her voice sharp. "It's not fair," she hissed. "You get everything while I'm left with just money." Can you believe the audacity? She actually said she deserved the house more than I did, because she was his wife. Inside, I was absolutely seething. The way she said it. Like I hadn't just lost my dad. Like I didn't have a lifetime of memories in those walls. Like she hadn't just waltzed in less than a year ago and decided she was entitled to everything he ever built. I knew arguing with her was pointless. She'd already convinced herself she was the real victim here. Nothing I said would change that. So, I did the one thing she wasn't expecting. I didn't fight back. Not yet. I let her believe she had a chance. I nodded along, pretended to consider her words, and told her I needed time to think. She looked so satisfied, so sure she'd planted the seed. Let her believe it, I thought. Let her think she's winning. Because when the time came, she wouldn't know what hit her. In the meantime, I started noticing things. Small at first. Rearranging furniture. Moving my dad's things around like she was settling in for good. Then it escalated. She started treating me like a guest in my own home, making little comments about helping me pack when I decided where I wanted to move. That's when I knew. She had completely convinced herself she was taking over. But the final straw came at the post-funeral family dinner. It was supposed to be a quiet, respectful gathering to remember my dad. Instead, she turned it into a full-blown pity party for herself. Right in the middle of dinner, she started crying. Loud, dramatic sobs, her shoulders shaking. She gasped about how hard things were, how much she missed my father. But then, somehow, she twisted it into an attack on me. She sobbed about feeling so alone, about being treated unfairly, and how I was making her life harder by not letting her stay in the home she shared with my father. She called herself a poor widow, and painted me as this cruel, heartless stepdaughter who'd turned on her the moment Dad was gone. Some family members looked uncomfortable. Others were actually starting to consider her words. I could see it happening. She was testing the waters, trying to see who would take her side. But I just let her talk. I let her go on, digging her own grave. I calmly finished my food. Then, when she finally stopped, I wiped my mouth with my napkin, set it down, and finally spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "It's funny," I said. "Really funny, how you're sitting here sobbing about me being unfair, when you've been trying to kick me out of my own house since the funeral ended." The room went utterly silent. I watched her face drain of all color as the realization hit her. She had walked right into my trap. And I wasn't done yet. That silence. It was thick, suffocating. My stepmother's face was completely pale, her crocodile tears drying up faster than I could blink. She'd been so confident her little dramatic act would sway everyone, make them turn on me. But now, all eyes were on her, waiting for an explanation. I didn't give her a chance. "It's really strange," I continued, "how you're wailing about how unfair I am when you've spent the last week trying to take over my house, a house you've never had any claim to." I turned to the relatives who had been looking sympathetic towards her. "Do you honestly think it's fair," I asked, "that the daughter of the deceased should be forced to leave her childhood home so his new wife of 6 months can take over?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. I still wasn't done. I told them I'd let her believe she had a chance, not because I was actually considering it, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go. And wow, I said, she went far. She moved my things. She acted like she already owned the place. She tried to manipulate me into leaving so she could claim it. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She was utterly speechless. Then came the desperate backtracking. She laughed nervously, shaking her head. "You've misunderstood everything," she stammered. "I never tried to take anything from you. I was just worried about living arrangements. I wanted to have a conversation." She even turned to the older relatives, trying to play the poor, confused widow again, blaming it on emotional times. I just raised an eyebrow. Moving my things without my permission and telling me I should start packing, I asked, "Is that just part of an emotional conversation?" The silence stretched again. Then my uncle, my father's brother, finally spoke up. He said he'd always thought my father was too generous when it came to his new wife, that things had moved too quickly. He looked my stepmother dead in the eye and said, "While I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt, it's clear now you never cared about my brother the way you claimed." Her face flushed bright red. Immediately, she went into damage control. Sniffling, shaking her head. "I loved your father more than anything. He meant the world to me. I'm only feeling lost because everything changed so suddenly." She even turned back to me, her voice soft and fragile, saying she only ever wanted us to coexist, to be a family. I almost laughed. "If you wanted us to be a family," I shot back, my voice laced with ice, "you wouldn't have tried to steal my home the moment my father was in the ground." That's when she snapped. Her voice went sharp. She accused me of being selfish, cold-hearted, said my father would be ashamed of me for treating his wife this way. Oh, that hit a nerve. "My father wouldn't be ashamed of me," I told her, my voice rising a little. "He'd be ashamed of you for trying to manipulate me out of my own home. If you really loved him, you'd respect his wishes instead of acting like a vulture circling his assets." Gasps went around the table. She started crying again, real tears this time, not for sympathy, but pure, unadulterated frustration. She turned to my dad's side of the family, begging for support. But no one, not even my more traditional relatives, spoke up for her. Everyone could see what was truly happening. Then came the final, satisfying blow. I leaned back in my chair, picked up my drink, and in the most casual tone I could muster, I said, "You know, you really have nothing to worry about. You're not homeless. You've got a hefty inheritance thanks to my father. You can buy a place of your own. Or, if you really want to live in a home that belonged to a man you married for just 6 months, you could always just go marry another rich guy." The way her face twisted in pure rage was beautiful. She shot up, knocking her chair back, and stormed out of the dining room. No one followed her. I let out a slow breath, took a sip of my drink, and just like that, the tension broke. My aunt, my father's sister, let out a chuckle. "Your father would have loved that," she said. Laughter rippled through the table, and dinner resumed. It was over for now. But I had a feeling she wasn't done. I had humiliated her. And someone like her, so entitled, so convinced she deserved more, wasn't just going to roll over. After that family dinner fiasco, where she totally humiliated herself, I decided I was done playing nice. She'd already been served an official eviction notice, but she was ignoring it, probably thinking she could just wear me down with enough guilt and manipulation. She was dead wrong. I mean, legally, I could have just thrown her stuff out. The eviction was really just me trying to be clean and make sure she couldn't accuse me of anything later. So that night I made some calls. The next morning I had a formal date for her removal, and I made sure she knew it. I had the official paperwork hand-delivered. When she saw it, she threw an absolute screaming tantrum, demanding to know how I could be so heartless. I simply told her, "You have no right to this house, and you've been given more than enough time to figure out where to go." She tried to argue to claim she needed more time, but I cut her off. "You had months to figure things out. You have money from my father's estate. The only reason you're still lingering is because you're hoping I'll cave." I didn't. And just to make things perfectly clear, I let her know that if she didn't leave peacefully, I would have no problem having the authorities escort her out. That shut her up real quick. On eviction day, I wasn't even there. I'd already packed up all my own things ages ago, and anything that belonged to her was boxed up and waiting. I just left the officials to handle it. And when she was finally out, I made sure to let the family know exactly what had happened. No more fake widow tears. No more pretending she was left with nothing. She got exactly what she deserved. And this house. This house was truly mine now. But I knew it wasn't over. Women like her, entitled, manipulative, fueled by greed, they don't just accept defeat. So, a few days later, when my cousin called, saying my stepmother was telling everyone she'd been tricked in the will and was considering legal action, I wasn't surprised. Annoyed? Absolutely. But not surprised. She'd crashed and burned at the family dinner, been publicly evicted. Now she was scrambling to rewrite the narrative, painting herself as the victim of some cruel, deceitful trick. I sighed. I asked my cousin how many people were actually buying her nonsense. My cousin hesitated, then admitted that while most of the family saw right through her, a few distant relatives, who didn't know the full story, were starting to murmur about how unfair it was for the grieving widow to be left with nothing. Left with nothing? I practically laughed. She had hundreds of thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, I had gotten the house my father worked his whole life for, the one he raised me in. And still, that wasn't enough for her. I asked my cousin if she'd actually filed anything yet. No, she said quickly. Just talking big. Hoping she could pressure me. That told me everything. She was bluffing. But just in case, I decided to be proactive. The next day, I made an appointment with my father's lawyer, the same one who handled his estate. I wasn't worried, but I wanted to be 100% certain everything was as airtight as I remembered. When I walked in and explained the situation, the lawyer, a seasoned man who'd seen every estate battle imaginable, just sighed and shook his head. "Not surprised," he said. "Turns out, my stepmother had already called him, demanding to know if she could contest the will. I raised an eyebrow. "How did that conversation go?" I asked. He smirked. I shut her down immediately. The will is ironclad. My father had personally gone over every detail, making it explicitly clear the house was for me, and me alone. His money, yes, a portion went to her, but he never intended for her to get everything. He'd protected my inheritance, ensuring there was no room for manipulation. So, even if she tried to contest it, she would lose badly. I let out a huge breath of relief. I wasn't in the mood to let her keep spreading lies, so I decided to put an end to her little game myself. That evening, I sent out a group message to all the relatives who'd been buzzing. Kept it simple, professional. I let them know I'd just come from a meeting with the lawyer. Her accusations were completely false. My father's will had been thoroughly reviewed. He'd made his decisions with full clarity, and there was zero legal ground for her to challenge it. I also added a little reminder. She hadn't been left with nothing. She'd inherited a significant amount of money, more than enough to live comfortably. The only thing she hadn't gotten was the house that was never meant to be hers. Then, just to drive the point home, I ended the message by saying if she continued spreading false claims or harassing me, I would have no problem filing a legal complaint for harassment. Less than a minute after sending that message, my phone blew up. Relatives apologizing, saying they were disgusted with her behavior. A couple of my dad's siblings even said they'd been suspicious of her from the start. And then, just as I expected, she called. I let it ring. She called again. Ignored. Then came the angry texts, accusing me of ruining her reputation, turning the family against her, being vindictive and cruel, claiming she only ever wanted to feel secure, that my father would be heartbroken to see how I was treating her. I didn't respond, because at the end of the day, I didn't need to. She had played her cards, and she had lost. The next time I saw her, a couple days later, at the grocery store, she looked absolutely exhausted, like she'd spent the last several nights fuming in frustration. She was living in some tiny apartment she'd gotten from her ex-husband, I heard. But what really caught my eye was how careful she was. She didn't look in my direction. She didn't try to start anything. For a moment, I actually thought, she finally gets it. She realizes I'm not someone she can push around. Oh, how wrong I was. About 20 days later, I was living in my own apartment closer to work, so I wasn't staying at the inherited house for now. I got a call from an older neighbor, who had known my dad for years. She sounded concerned. She told me my stepmother had been lurking around the property, hanging out in the backyard late at night. At first, I thought maybe she was just being dramatic. Maybe my stepmother was just driving by, mourning her lost opportunity to freeload off me for the rest of her life. But the next morning when I stopped by the house, I noticed something strange. The back door handle looked like it had been tampered with. I thought I was imagining it at first. Then I checked the security camera footage. And there she was. My stepmother, sneaking around the backyard in the middle of the night, trying to break in. I was absolutely livid. No shame, no sense of boundaries. She had lost the house. She had been legally evicted. And yet, she still thought she could take what wasn't hers. That's when I decided, if she wanted to act like a criminal, I'd treat her like one. Instead of confronting her immediately, I waited. I knew her type. She was desperate, and she would try again. So, I called in a favor from a friend who worked in private security. We set up extra cameras, and we waited. Sure enough, 2 nights later she came back. Only this time she was bolder. She had a duffel bag, and she was trying to force open the living room window. I didn't even give her a chance to get inside. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, she actually had the audacity to act like she was the victim. She told them she was just retrieving sentimental items, and that I was being cruel by locking her out of her own home. The officers were not amused. They asked her for proof that anything inside belonged to her. Of course, she had none. All she had were excuses and her usual fake tears. But this time, it didn't work. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was attempted trespassing and burglary. The police escorted her away, and I pressed charges. When word got out, my family was split. Some relatives, mostly on her side, tried to guilt-trip me, saying I'd gone too far involving the police. But my dad's side, they were completely with me. My uncle even called to say how proud he was of how I handled everything. He told me she'd always been a gold digger and that my dad had been too blinded by love to see it. But now, everyone saw her for exactly who she was. Her last stunt had completely backfired. She'd lost whatever sympathy she had left. As for me, I finally had peace. No more scheming. No more fake widow tears. Just me in the home my father had left for me, exactly as he had wanted. If my stepmother thought her stunt at the house was going to be the worst of it, she had another thing coming. Because while she was busy breaking the law, I was busy breaking apart her so-called inheritance. After the attempted break-in, I had a long conversation with my lawyer. I wanted to make sure she never ever had any claim to anything my father left behind. That's when he brought up something really interesting. While my dad had left her a portion of his estate, the will actually wasn't as airtight as we thought. There were loopholes. Turns out, my father hadn't wanted anything too complicated with her part of the inheritance, probably assuming she wouldn't challenge anything. But she did. And because she overplayed her hand, fought for more than she was entitled to, and acted in such bad faith, eviction, attempted break-in, she had unknowingly opened the door for me to challenge everything. My dad never wanted her to have full control of anything. Just enough to support herself. And since she'd already tried to manipulate the will, been evicted, and then tried to break in, it gave me all the ammunition I needed to contest her inheritance. When she received that legal notice, she lost it. She sent me furious messages, accusing me of destroying a poor widow's life. Seriously, she needed to stop overplaying that card. She even went on a rant on Facebook, painting herself as this tragic victim whose evil stepdaughter was out to get her. Claimed my father's dying wish was for her to be taken care of, and I was a greedy brat for going against it. But she conveniently forgot to mention the part where she lied, manipulated, and literally tried to break into the house. I, of course, didn't react. This was all evidence for court. Stupid woman. She started calling distant relatives, trying to rally them, but it didn't work. Most of them already knew she was suspicious. Some even messaged me, saying they had zero sympathy for her anymore. Then came the court battle. She showed up in her full widow's best performance attire, all black, sniffling into a tissue like she was grieving all over again. She tried to play the victim, but my lawyer? He ripped through her arguments like wet paper. We provided evidence of her eviction, proof of her attempted break-in, messages of her trying to take over the house, financial records showing she'd already taken a large sum of money but was still demanding more. The judge was not impressed. When she started dramatically weeping, the judge immediately shut her down and asked her to focus on actual facts. She wasn't expecting that. She'd counted on sympathy, thinking the court would see her as the poor, abandoned widow. My eyes practically rolled out of my head. Instead, they saw a manipulative woman who had way overstepped her bounds. And then my lawyer dropped the final blow. We argued that because she had acted in bad faith, she had violated the terms of her own inheritance. The ruling came in faster than expected. She lost everything. Her inheritance. Gone. The money she'd already taken? She was ordered to return a portion of it. The house. Legally and officially mine, like it always was. The moment the judge announced the ruling, she just sat there, completely frozen. Then, right there in front of everyone, she let out this primal wail, like her life had just ended. She clutched her chest, mumbling about how unfair this was, how she was being thrown onto the streets. The judge didn't care. They simply told her she had made her own bed and now she had to lie in it. As I walked out of that courtroom, I could hear her shrieking at her lawyer, asking how he could let this happen. But she was the one who ruined herself. She wasn't done though. She started harassing my father's old friends, spinning the story to make herself look like the abandoned, mistreated widow. I'm pretty sure she even tried to flirt with them too. But it didn't work. People had seen how she acted after my father's passing. They knew she wasn't some grieving widow. She was a gold digger who got caught. Her own friends started distancing themselves. Some even called me to apologize, saying they had no idea how bad she truly was. She tried to shame me on social media, but by then, no one cared. I wasn't the villain in this story. She was. And the best part? She ended up having to move out of state because she had burned every single bridge here. She couldn't show her face at any family gathering. And she couldn't manipulate anyone else into taking her side. She lost the house. She lost her inheritance. And most importantly, she lost the game she thought she was winning. I finally got to grieve my father in peace. No more drama. No more fighting. Just me in the house he left for me, knowing I had done exactly what he would have wanted. She thought she could take what wasn't hers. She thought she could steal from me. She thought she could bully and manipulate her way into my life. But in the end, she ended up with nothing. And I got everything back, just as it should be. So what do you guys think? Have you ever dealt with someone so utterly manipulative, especially during such a vulnerable time? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.